Camels in Paradise, the challenge down under. So if you've been following the fires in Australia and take a big look at how just across the whole continent they are, it is amazing. Being on the West Coast, we had that experience a few years ago and a few since. Massive fires covering good parts of a few states, and the smoke covering whole states and crossing states' lines. It didn't care. So in that was particulate matters and dust and soot and generally unhealthy things. But what they exposed is nature's cycles and forced a conversation about nature's cycles and what does and doesn't go wrong in these cycles. What does this have to do with camels? Well, in the Australian continent now, we're talking the continent, not the neighborhood, not the cities and the towns, the whole continent. Camels were introduced onto what was an isolated system. Cats have been introduced that were never there before, that type of predator. So what those are is kinks in the natural cycle, the billions of years of building on that isolated continent, or millions of years, the food chains that can live and thrive in those climates. So think of Australia, think of the beauty of Australia and the amazement of Australia. And in almost everything we visualize, you'll see camels, but those camels were not there to begin with. And they were introduced and have begun a long, slow change in the natural biology of every part that they have covered. They don't go into the woods. They're desert animals. But as the desert encroaches the woods and wins, the camels begin to flourish more. They have no natural predators. They have no natural part in the cycle of life. Even when they pass away, the amount of material to digest is larger than the norm for the whole continent. So it adds to a food cycle of a different set of animals out there, a different set of critters, a different set of molds and spores in the biome that subtly changes the plants in the desert around. That's how subtle it is. Those plants, when you drive through the desert, those plants, when you drive through the forest, have taken millions of years to figure out how to coexist with the nature around them and the cycles of nature and the harshness of winters and summers. And the desert doesn't suffer many of those things. The rainforests don't suffer many of those things, so they never had to get used to a freeze. All these things are just cumulative parts of the world around us. So those camels introduced into Australia have reduced the food stores that other creatures depended on. They have no natural predators to keep them in check. So like any species, they will overrun their food supply and then do a natural downsizing or correction from starvations, and that cycle will continue. Since before humans were here, and for probably a short time afterwards, because that's how nature works. So culling those camels is a tragedy in one sense. It could be a godsend in another sense to the native populations that have suffered. What the camels eat is not available to local resources. The koalas are lucky camels haven't developed a taste for their eucalyptus. Because as in natural population growth, the camels would come in, feed well, make large families, eat the area down, and so begins a cycle of nature. We have the same conversation here in the Americas with horses out on the ranges and those beautiful animals taking the resources that nature has used, upsetting the natural flow of the food chain. Horses have no predators because we've killed them all. The bears, the mountain lions, the predator species that threaten, that eat our food. That's what we have done. We have taken many of the predators out of these food chains, the predators that tear apart that carcass and go poop across the plains and spread the wealth of minerals and goodies and poop that feed the next plant life cycle for the rabbits they're going to eat in the next round of life. So there, that didn't solve the kill the camels question, right? What is the answer to these things? If we stopped eating cows, that would leave no reason for cows. Period. You don't domesticate a cow. You don't have cow pets. Whatever cows are happy out there on the range are going to disappear because they'll have no value other than aesthetic value to humanity, and they'll go the way of the pyramids. So, if a bigger balance is considered, and it probably should be regarding camels, regarding fences and rangelands across an area, and the water underneath it we pump to make it green. Fighting these natural cycles can be a losing battle, and we're finding that out. Happy year of the CO2 conversations.